I want you to listen to this, please. This is pertaining to the protection of not only a president or a prior president, but this is pertaining to national security, because it is crucial at all times, regardless whether you are in control of the nuclear codes at that particular time or you're not in control of the nuclear codes towards being a prior president. It is essential that all American as well as other diplomatic leaders' lives are protected. What you're fixing to hear is a passionate, loud concern over the lives of not only Donald J. Trump, but over the lives of any president that wants to be the president of the United States, of how come lax security measures happened 17 days ago regarding the attempted assassinated attempt upon Donald J. Trump's life. Please listen.
Well, I think there was a delay in reporting, not having that real time. So as they were closing in on him, as information is known, as
be more specific when who were closing in on him.
As local law enforcement were closing in on him, as he's seen
closing in on the shooter
across the roof, right? That information, and we're getting to the bottom of that. We're working on trying to figure out what was the delay. Why didn't we hear that coming out of the unified command? So based on the information I have right now, what I can tell you, Senator, is that apparently not having that real-time information is what really hindered us in being able to understand more than it was just the locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. There was actually a little bit something more urgent than that.
And does it appear that that is due to a lack of communications links between relevant officials and agencies, or poor communications practices and a failure to report?
I don't want to rule out. I want to have a neutral opinion on that. So I don't know if it was poor practices. I can tell you that the interoperability, having the not being able to have that technical fix, which is a lofty goal to be able to do that, is something that has been a hindrance. But that's why we use a counterpart system.
So there, in fact, is not the capability when an intergovernmental, interagency team is deployed to secure a site like this and to mount, if necessary, a quick reaction. There is not currently the capability for example, state law enforcement, SWAT personnel, or local law enforcement officers to communicate directly with Secret Service officers on site?
So technically you could do it, but it would take a long time to get it done, and for a 1 day or an 8-hour operation, it requires a lot, and it would be months of planning, of knowing that we are going to go to this particular jurisdiction and that we're going to need your frequencies, the keys, and we're going to need to load you into our radios, and you're going to be needed to load it into ours, and vice versa.
Right. Well, this presents potentially, I think, an opportunity for the Homeland Security Committee. I mean, not just in an executive protection context, but any complex incident response, any counterterrorism, any natural disaster context. The inability swiftly to link personnel from disparate jurisdictions at the local, state, and federal level is a vulnerability for the nation, is it not?
And it is. How come that Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas can have their meeting once a year pertaining to all their business associates all over the world, and Homeland Security can go in there and monitor that situation for as lengthy as a month possibly, of making sure that there is not an international incident that happens regarding some of Walmart's business affairs that occurs once a year in Bentonville, Arkansas? How come we can make sure that there's not an incident But yet, no, we cannot be sure of the security, the national security of the United States regarding protecting either a president or a prior president. That's the part that I don't understand. Number one. Number two, was the lack of security, was it negligence? Was it gross negligence? Or was it actually fumigated in some sort of a plot? Now, I heard some senator a while ago made mention about the Secret Service records pertaining to the telephone calls of January the 6th, of who called who texted who, and who didn't text who, because we know, looking through various investigations, and this is only one investigation of the investigations of this particular plot that failed, the assassination attempt, that our investigators can basically go in and find out any and everything about whatever and whoever that they want to find out about. Now, at first, I think it was ATM or Apple or somebody like that was kicking up about privacy rights. And they actually had to hire people to be able to go in and synchronize and hack into this person's personal identity pertaining to their phone, that basically Apple or ATM was against at first. I don't know what has stimulated since then, but I do know this, listening to various news stations pertaining to this assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump's life, they can go in and find out basically when this individual combed his hair, what type of toothpaste that he used, whether or not he liked this or that, whether or not he was into this or that, and they can go back digitally and find out any and everything that that individual has ever looked at, been interested in, or what his leading concerns was. If our investigators can do that, I know for a fact that they can go in and synchronize proper investigation tools in understanding just exactly what went on January the 6th. Because if the truth be known, there was Secret Service agents that was purposely being lax that day, that was allowing for the protesters to come on board and basically beat or brutally, savagely attack some of the police officers that day that was absolutely overpowered and overwhelmed regarding these incidences. So whenever they talk about Secret Service not being biased pertaining to them being political, they're full of it. They are biased. They are political. They do make a determining stance of whether or not they are for this individual or not for this individual. That's the reason why that I have had a brush in with Homeland Security, that have studied them for years, not just days, but years, in understanding that it is basically a government agency within an agency, that it's kind of like the Oz, the mighty Oz in Behind the Curtain, that's actually in control of the American people's affairs. Especially due to the fact of all the, not just ridiculation, not just persecution, but all the resistances that come up against the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, which is the individual talking in behind the camera right now, Dennis James Jackson, also known as Shuby, pertaining to how that they purposely targeted my family and myself and allowed for certain horrible events to happen in my life, bleeding down through other agencies that actually thought that they was doing their duty in what that they was doing, but in actuality they was actually doing the duty of the devil versus the duty of the people. There has been a security threat, more so than ever, since Ronald Reagan finally accomplished what he accomplished in succeeding with the superpowers in his latter presidency. For some reason, and the only reason why that I can think of this reason is because it's a supernatural motive in behind this reason, is that Homeland Security all of a sudden changed. Up until then, Homeland Security was on their toes. Up until then, we didn't know if Russia was going to push the big buttons on us first, or if we was going to push the big buttons on them. And during the Cold War era, it was total paranoid frenzies that was going on all over the world, in not knowing how that we was going to secure the planet pertaining to a nuclear attack. After 1988, whenever 9 tapes circled to the White House, those agencies changed their strive. They changed the way that they automatically should have put up defenses and protections protecting the American people, pertaining to the American people's interest. Even though prior to 1988, in I think it was 81 or 82, Ronald Reagan almost got killed by an assassin. Ronald Reagan's life was protected because God put a hedge around Ronald Reagan's life, because Ronald Reagan had a purpose for not just America, but for the world. And I'm inclined to believe that this hedge that we have obviously seen over a prior President Trump's life, could very well validate the same reasons pertaining to him having a purpose and God wanting him to fulfill that purpose. You keep in mind, whenever Jesus Christ said that all the gates of hell would not and could not prevail against the kingdom of God, Jesus knew that whenever he was talking that way, because Jesus never spoke lightly of the devil. He never spoke lightly of the devil's powers. He never spoke lightly of Lucifer, the Antichrist. Whenever Jesus said that all the gates of hell could not prevail, he knew exactly what he was talking about. He knew the forces that was against the kingdom of God, and he also knew the power of God, because he was God, because Jesus Christ was God. So whenever I talk about these supernatural events, these spiritual events, like the Bible talks about, that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, I know exactly what I'm talking about pertaining to the characteristics of the Bible. Because if you think that we're just in this thing alone, you're automatically batting over the mound and missing it by 3 foot. Because we're not alone. We are being observed, we are being witnessed, we are being analyzed, we are being looked at every single day, depending upon who you are and what type of stance that you take in society and with God. Because I promise you, if you're a true Christian of God, believing in the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, especially if you are in upper appellages of influences, the devil is going to see you as an enemy, as an adversary, and he is going to try to do everything he can to tear you apart and bring you down, regardless whether it's physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, or any other way. The devil is out to kill, steal, and destroy, and if you don't think he's doing his job, all you got to do is look around. Because he's definitely in force right now at 110%, working overtime towards trying to bring any and everything down. That's the reason why it is so crucial for me to understand why that event happened the way that it happened in 1988, and how come suddenly, all of a sudden, it was close-lipped coming from the White House. And basically, Ronald Reagan at that point in time had become almost senile to the point that his wife was basically running the show to begin with. Something happened to Ronald Reagan. I don't know if it was spiritual. I don't know if it was emotional. I don't know if it was physical or psychological, but something happened to Reagan after he got off that airplane and finally convinced the superpowers that the world was not going to be destroyed with humanity because of what humanity had to destroy the face of the earth. Something happened to Ronald Reagan. Something happened whenever that material come back to me from the White House, knowing that biblical Bible prophecy was to be fulfilled, but there was a resistance movement that started at the top, similar towards how King Herod resistance movement started at the top, because King Herod knew that it was prophesied for this Jesus, this prophet, this Savior, to come on board, and because he was infuriated and intimidated by the prophecy, he put out a hit on Jesus Christ basically from the time that he was born. Now, that is a powerful, powerful motivation of a movement that began even before Jesus was a year old. As a matter of fact, Jesus was just an infant at that time. So whenever you get to looking at the forces of power, the forces of evil, the forces of good, you must understand that people does things for a reason. There's a motive in behind them doing what they're doing. And I think whenever you listen to this, you're going to find out, and it's going to be intense. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be intense. You're going to find out what certain people's motives are, whether or not it was done innocently, ignorantly, or intentionally. And to be quite honest with you, I've said this before, and I don't mean this in any form or fashion negatively towards any president that America has ever had, but it could not have happened to a better group of people. Regarding now Homeland Security, Secret Service being exposed in their negligence, and as far as I'm concerned, it goes a whole lot deeper than negligence. It goes to the point of intent. They intended to be lax that day. They intended to let down their guard because they was being driven by an evil spirit, that the same evil spirit that wanted to kill Ronald Reagan, that this same evil spirit was in that mix that was trying to do the exact same thing to Donald J. Trump. Thank God that there was a hedge similar towards the hedge that was around Job and the hedge that is around other true born-again believing Christians. Thank God that there was a hedge around Ronald Reagan, and thank God that there was a hedge around Donald J. Trump of an attempt assassin that basically had to be taken down, that as far as I'm concerned never really should have even had the opportunity of being taken down, because he should have been stopped at the door. He should have been stopped before he ever even got to the building, much less climb on top of the building, much less fire off 8 simultaneously shots. Please listen.
I would think, and based on my experience, being able to talk to other agencies in real time certainly would assist in that response.
Mr. Chairman, do I have time for one more question?
Yes.
Thank you. I know others have touched on this. One of the things that's been most baffling to the public has been the failure to fully secure this structure, which even to a layperson's uninformed eye is clearly presents as a site from which an attack on the former president of this event could be mounted. And it had particular characteristics that made it even more of potential value to an attacker. Just walk us through one more time. Is there not an established doctrine or practice or checklist by which such sites are assessed for threat and determine whether or not to be within or without of the security perimeter?
So, Senator, controlling high ground is something that is a must for us whenever we go into a location.
Well, I know we're all eager for more information on why that task was not completed in this case. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Senator Lee?
Why was President Trump allowed to take the stage at 6:02 p.m., exactly 17 minutes after multiple suspicious person reports were provided, complete with photos and information suggesting that the assailant had a rangefinder, something that ordinary people don't use in this kind of circumstance?
Senator, again, it was suspicion, not weapon, or there was never communication of that there was an individual with a gun or threat or other bad intentions.
How many suspicious person reports did you receive that day?
I'll get back to you on the exact number, but there were other individuals that came to the attention of law enforcement that day.
Would President Biden ever be allowed on stage under similar circumstances with an unresolved set of multiple suspicious person reports provided, including indicating that there was a rangefinder involved?
Senator, I can tell you that a suspicious person on the outer perimeter with local law enforcement attempting to locate would happen, but I would need more information as far as whether or not we would allow the president to go on or off. Again, for us, it comes down to weapon, a potential threat. Is the individual carrying an IED? Is there a weapon? Is there some other factor that now ramps up our attention to let's hold off on this?
If there were 8 shell casings found next to the assailant's body, but he was neutralized after the first shot, where do those other shots come from? Where do the other shots go?
As far as the assailant's shooting?
Yes. So did the assailant get out 8 shots, or were those shell casings left from the day before? Where did they come from?
The shooter, Senator, we believe fired 8 rounds. We had the shooting reconstruction team go out there for a period of days and collect all that. So we have bullet holes, bullet fragmentation, all taken back, and we're still putting together the trajectory and ballistic analysis, although we do have fragments of the bullets, and bullets have been collected in the distance from the shooter's weapon.
Gotcha. It's my understanding there was a sniper team assigned to a window with complete overlook, complete view of the roof, the same rooftop, the sloped rooftop where the shots were fired. It's also my understanding, according to some whistleblower accounts, that post was abandoned. What can you tell me about that? Why was it abandoned?
So I saw that from the colonel's testimony, sir, and it's something that I've asked and our mission assurance is getting to the bottom of. And there were two-man counter-sniper teams from the locals that were in that AGR building.
And so at some point they just left?
That I don't have an answer for you on that, Senator, but it seems to me that if even one of them left, there should have been remaining some additional eyes left in that building.
Yeah, that seems like something that maybe should be one of the very first questions you address. I'm actually surprised that you don't know that already, and I'd ask that you submit to us in writing what you learn as soon as you learn it. Will you commit to that?
Yes, sir.
What can you tell me about? Let me just state this way. Multiple requests were made by Trump's protective detail and by Trump's campaign team to the Secret Service for additional resources. I'm told that those were denied. And as I recall, the Secret Service spokesperson initially denied that such requests were made and denied. Why not tell the truth from the outset? What were they trying to do there?
So, Senator, I don't think there was any intention to mislead.
Seems like a pretty material fact, doesn't it?
I saw that report. Go ahead, sir.
Will you commit to me that you will submit to us in writing what requests were made, by whom, and to whom, and when they were denied?
I will, sir.
Okay. Look, at the end of the day, we're looking at a situation in which, at a minimum, people knew that this guy had a gun at least 2 minutes before the shooting happened. I want to know what you could tell me about what happened during that final 2-minute period, where a whole bunch of people in the crowd saw and were shouting, "He's got a gun." During that 2-minute period, perhaps at the beginning of it, the local police started to climb the rooftop, and there was at least 30 seconds after which local police were able to personally observe the shooter with a gun, had the gun pointed at him. What happened during that time period, and why on earth was President Trump not removed from the stage at that moment?
So again, Senator, the reason why President Trump was not removed was, again, we did not have anything more than locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. Wasn't determined as to whether or not it was the same individual or not, and there was no report of
The same individual as what?
the same suspicious individual.
Right, but we've left the category of suspicious individual at that point. You've got a guy with a gun on a rooftop 136 yards away from the stage. You know that he's got a gun at that point. What happened during that time period that did not result in President Trump, his protective detail, being notified of that and him immediately being removed from the situation?
Senator, what I will say, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Director Abate. No information regarding a weapon on the roof was ever passed to our personnel.
How is that even possible? Do you want to comment to that?
Senator, again, I believe that information, and this is probably something my colleague can expound on, information that was in local law enforcement channels, but did not cross over and make it to Secret Service awareness.
Senator, just to clarify the timeline, so the individual was first seen by law enforcement on the roof at about 6:08. We're still working to perfect the timeline based on the radio comms and all that. It wasn't until at 6:11:03 seconds, the officer saw him and called out his arm. That was the first sighting where he had the rifle on the roof, and then
And that was relayed to the Secret Service Command Center at that
my understanding is no, Secret Service, it was not relayed to them. It's a narrower time frame, though. It's probably about maybe it's a half a minute between the time he's seen with the rifle and when the shots are fired.
But there's still time. At that point, if there were an open channel of communication in which they were able to tell him, he's got a gun, take him out. You could still take President Trump off the stage. You could have him duck. You could have the shooter neutralized. Do you not have a channel of communication by which they can say, gun, take him out?
So again, Senator, that information stayed in local channels and did not make it over to Secret
Did they not
Service.
consider that relevant? You're saying that you're saying that the local police didn't consider that relevant enough to pass along to the Secret Service?
So I think that they were in the midst of dealing with a very critical situation, and they articulated that over the radio, as I understand it. However, it was never relayed over to us.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, can you put your first poster, your first demonstrative back up?
Please put A up, please.
Let's make sure everybody can see it. This is the photograph, I believe, that you took, your team took of the roof, the AGR roof. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so from this vantage point, as the law enforcement who are in those windows, as they look left, they should be able to see the shooter clearly there on the AGR second floor roof. My question is, why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper on that roof?
So, Senator, we're when we post up, our methodology is to look at things that can see in on our protectees, so that they can provide that coverage.
But why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper there with clear line of sight? That roof has a clear line of sight to the former president. Why didn't you put a Secret Service counter sniper there?
The Secret Service's counter sniper role is to neutralize those threats that are looking in on us from where the protectee is, not necessarily
You think
this
maybe you
position.
might want to revise that protocol in light of what happened here?
They were protecting the principal, and I think in
Principal got shot.
understand that, sir.
So do you think you might want to revise the protocol? Let me ask you this. Who was the lead site agent who made the decision to leave the AGR building completely outside of the security perimeter? Who was that?
Senator, I cannot give you that name. This person is operational. They're still doing investigations. They're still doing protective
Have they
visits.
been relieved of duty?
Senator, they have
I
not
know
been
their
relieved
name,
of
by the
duty.
way. Why have they not been relieved of duty?
They are still cooperating, not only being interviewed by the FBI, but also by our Office of Professional Responsibility. And we will let the facts of the mission assurance and any further investigations play out.
Is it Isn't the fact that a former president was shot, that a good American is dead, that other Americans were critically wounded, isn't that enough mission failure for you to say that the person who decided that that building should not be in the security perimeter probably ought to be stepped down?
Senator, I think you're using the word decided, and I think we need to allow the investigation play out to include.
Okay, so who did make the decision then? If it wasn't the lead site agent, who made the decision not to put that in the security perimeter?
Senator, you're zeroing in on one particular agent. I want to find out exactly what was the entire decision process. So I think I want to be neutral and make sure that we get to the bottom of it and interview everybody in order to determine if there was more than one person who perhaps exercised bad judgment.
Well, sure. My question is, why don't you relieve everybody of duty who made bad judgment? So yeah, you're right. I am zeroing in on somebody. I'm trying to find somebody who's accountable here. And so you're telling me that the person who made the decision not to include this in the perimeter has not been relieved of duty. What about the person who's in charge of the interoperability of radio frequencies between local law enforcement and Secret Service? Has that person been relieved of duty?
No, Senator, because interoperability is a challenge, is a greater challenge than just one person. On that day, we had a counterpart system. It failed.
As the person who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance, and as opposed to zeroing in on one.
What more do you need to investigate to know
exactly what the decision-making process was?
What more do you need to investigate to know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable? I mean, what more do you need to know?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot put my thumb on the scale. Otherwise,
what do you mean put your thumb on the scale?
You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure.
Is it not prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days.
Then
just like you have.
Somebody
and I will tell you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly persecuted?
Unfairly, sir. We
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
You said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years, that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And you weren't involved in any of that? You were never involved in the decision making?
No, sir, I was not.
Let me ask you just one or two other things here quickly. Well, whistleblowers tell me that, in fact, law enforcement were stationed to be on that roof, and that law enforcement abandoned their post because it was too hot. Is that accurate?
Senator, I have heard that as well. Again, they posted up inside. And I think moving forward, as I said earlier, we're going to ensure that state and local counter snipers are on roofs.
But do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof, and the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
Well, that remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were you offered drones?
Senator
So there
Holloway.
was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
Probably.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. I agree with what you said at the outset, that the individual Secret Service agents demonstrated remarkable personal courage, putting their bodies in between the line of sight of the shooter and the president. That being said, the bravery of the line agents is quite different from the decisions of Secret Service leadership. Secret Service leadership committed catastrophic security failures. Indeed, the worst security failures for the Secret Service since 1981, since the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan. It is incumbent upon this committee to determine why those security failures happened. Just after the shooting, Secret Service put out an official statement from your spokesperson that says there's an untrue assertion that a member of the former president's team requested additional security resources, that those were rebuffed. This is absolutely false. In fact, we added protective resources and technology and capabilities as part of the increased campaign travel tempo. Was this tweet accurate?
With respect to Butler, Pennsylvania, it is accurate, sir.
It is accurate that the Trump team had not asked for additional security and had not been rebuffed.
If you're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, all assets requested were approved. If you're talking about the media reporting of assets requested, there were times when assets were unavailable and not able to be filled, and those gaps were staffed with state and local law enforcement tactical assets.
So I'm reading from the Washington Post, July 20th, 2024. Secret Service said to have denied requests for more security at Trump events. The opening paragraph: top officials of the U.S. Secret Service repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Donald Trump's security detail in the 2 years leading up to his attempted assassination, according to 4 people familiar with the requests. Is that right, that repeatedly the Trump detail asked for more resources and repeatedly Secret Service leadership turned that down?
That is not accurate, Senator. Assets are requested. There's a process that is made. And
how many requests did the Trump team or the Trump detail ask for?
I can get you that number in a queue.
You don't know now.
So I can speak to the ones that were reported in the Washington Post, and we can go through them if you like.
But you don't know how many requests there were.
In general, how many requests since 2021 that the former Trump detail has made a request for assets?
You've had 2 weeks. You had a spokesperson put something out that is false on its face. By the way, did you approve this statement when it went out?
I don't know if I did or didn't, Senator.
Has this spokesperson, is he still employed? Does he still have a job?
He is still employed, Senator.
So he lied on behalf of the Secret Service. He still has a job. Did your predecessor, the former director, did she approve this statement?
Senator, our comms team, they send out statements, they do deconflict them, and they put them out.
Did she approve this statement?
I don't know if she did or did not.
And you don't know if you did either?
I don't recall approving it, Senator.
Will you commit to provide this committee in writing every written request for additional resources from the Trump campaign or the Trump detail and every response from Secret Service?
Senator, I will commit to providing responses and getting you the information that you are seeking.
Let me ask you something. And who makes the decision to deny those requests? Did you make that decision?
Which requests? Are you talking about the ones that were in the
Any of
Washington
them.
Post?
Yes.
The process, sir, is that a detail will make a request for either staffing, technical assets, that is handled between the field office and the detail. It goes up to a logistics office between our
Okay, so there's a bureaucracy. Is there a decision maker?
It's not a bureaucracy,
Give
Senator.
me the
it's a
person
process.
that's a decision maker. Is there one?
Senator, it's a conversation. It's not just an absolute yay or nay.
So let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the Secret Service leadership made a political decision to deny these requests. And I think the Biden administration has been suffused with partisan politics. Did the same person who denied the request for additional security to President Trump also repeatedly deny the request for security to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose father was murdered by an assassin and whose uncle was murdered by an assassin? Did the same person make that decision?
Senator, what I will tell you is that Secret Service agents are not political.
Okay, you're not answering my question. But you know what? Leadership appointed by the president. Leadership appointed by the president is political. I have a simple question: yes or no? Did the same person deny the Trump request that also denied the RFK request? That's a yes or no question.
Senator, that is not a yes or no question. One, there is a process for a candidate nominee to receive protection.
Does the buck stop anywhere? Does the buck stop anywhere?
Bipartisan process that
it's a bicameral, bipartisan process. What camera?
For a candidate,
you are not a Congress. You don't have a cameral.
Mr. Kennedy submitted a request that was referred over to the CPAC.
Okay, you're refusing to answer the question. Let me ask, because the failures on that day were catastrophic. By the way, is it true that on the day of the Butler event that Secret Service transferred agent from President Trump to the First Lady?
No, sir, that's not true.
That's been widely reported.
It's not true. There was one airport agent that actually went on the manpower request for the Trump detail. They handled the arrival at the airport.
What was the relative size of the Trump detail compared to the detail that is assigned to the President or the First Lady?
Senator, the former president travels with a full shift, just like the president.
What's so the exact same size? Is that your testimony that President Trump had the same size detail that President Biden has?
On the day of in Butler, the agents surrounding him, it is the same number of agents surrounding the president today. There is a difference between a sitting president who also not only...
Hold on, you're using president in a way that is not clear. Is it your testimony that in Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump had the same number of agents protecting him that Joe Biden has at a comparable event?
I'm telling you the shift, the close protection shift surrounding. That's
yes
what you asked me, Senator, and I'm trying to answer it.
You are not answering it. Is it the same number of agents or not?
Senator, there is a difference between the sitting president of the United States.
Then what's the difference?
The difference?
2x, 3x, 5x,
National
10x?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike.
I'm not
other assets.
How many more
travel
agents?
With the president. The authority to launch a.
Then what's the difference?
The difference?
2x, 3x, 5x,
National
10x?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike, sir. The difference?
2x, 3x, 5x,
National
10x?
Command Authority to launch a nuclear strike, sir.
I'm not
other
asking.
assets.
How many more
travel
agents?
with the president that
Sir,
the former president
sir,
will
you are
not get.
refusing to
But
answer
the number of Secret Service
Sir,
agents protecting him.
Stop interrupting me.
Go ahead,
You are
Senator.
refusing to answer clear and direct questions. I am asking the relative difference in the number of agents between those assigned to Donald Trump and those assigned to Joe Biden. I'm not asking why you assign more to Joe Biden. I'm asking, is the difference, is it 2x? Is it 3x? Is it 5x? Is it 10x?
Senator, I will get you that number so you can see it with your own eyes.
Senator Marshall, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, there was probably 10 buildings within sniper range of President Trump on that afternoon. Why was the building being used by the sniper not in the security zone?
That's a question that I've asked, Senator. There was a decision that we were going to construct the site and it was going to maintain within the Butler Farm site, Butler Farm Show site. That building, that AGR, was right on the curtilage of our outer perimeter. And it's something that I, again, having been there and walked it, I had a hard time understanding.
So there's no protocol that says anything within 300, 500 yards, direct line of the president, should be in or out of the security zone. There's not a protocol that describes that.
So, Senator, what we try to do is we try to either control the high ground or mitigate line of sight concerns.
Okay. You've stated that on multiple occasions, President Trump's team was denied more of a detail, more assets. Who denies that? Who is the person that denies that, generally speaking?
So, Senator, there's a process. Again, there was a conversation had with the detail.
There's got to be a buck stopping. There's got to be someone. Who is the person? Is it a level within the D.C. agencies? Is someone in the Pittsburgh office? Who denies this?
It has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh office,
Okay.
sir. It is a conversation between not only the detail, the field office, but also
I don't want to know the conversation. I want to know who makes the decision.
the decision, sir, is it's our process between the Office of Protective Operations and the Office of Investigations.
Is there a title for this position?
It is called we affectionately call it the War Room, and it's where all of our logistics files into.
So it's a room that makes the decision.
It is a staffing and assignments officer.
Okay, is the Secret Service required to do a briefing with all entities of law enforcement involved in the event of the days leading up to the event and the day of the event?
We do a police meeting, sir, where we start the...
What's required? Is it required? Is it part of your standard operating procedure?
The police meeting is what initiates the advance, and that is what is required.
Was this meeting held on that day?
The police meeting took place on the days prior to that.
Do you have documents of that meeting would actually happen?
If we do, sir, I will get them to you.
But you're saying that it did not happen on the day of the event.
So I think what you're referring to is a briefing that the state and locals would have done with themselves. We did a briefing with our own folks. They briefed.
When did you? Did your people meet with local law enforcement the day of the assassination attempt?
Yes.
Okay, and you realize that the local law enforcement says no, that that meeting never happened, and that's why we need to get these people in to talk to us, and this is why the FBI needs to be speaking up sooner than later and say that meeting did or didn't happen. Surely there's some type of documentation of that meeting one way or the other. Is there documentation of that meeting?
So, Senator, I can tell you that our what you're referring to is the counter sniper team seconded to Butler ESU. Our personnel met with the team lead from Butler ESU, and they discussed areas of concern, areas of responsibility, and that did in fact happen at the site on that day.
Director, I think you would agree with me that there were multiple individual and institutional failures the day of this assassination attempt. You have a $3 billion budget. You're still 2,000 employees short. And in 2022, the Secret Service had a 48% departure rate. That tells me you either have a cultural problem or just gross incompetence. Which one is it?
So, Senator, I would challenge that 48% departure rate. Let me get you some statistics that we have. It is not 48%.
But go back to the multiple failures that we saw on an individual basis as long as systemic. I think it proves that there's either incompetence or some type of a cultural problem within the SS.
So, Senator, I know you're not calling our workforce incompetent, and I know we do not have a cultural problem. If anything, we are dedicated to making sure that we don't have mission failure. And let me get you the hiring numbers that we have, because I think you will actually see that, no, we've actually done very well fairly recently with trying to make sure that we have the numbers that we need. Of course, we need more people. Everybody does. But let me get you those numbers, and I think let your own eyes.
Would you also disagree with me when it's reported that almost 50% of the rank and file officers don't trust leadership within the Secret Service?
Senator, I think it's the right of every worker to talk bad about their boss.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Hirono, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, there is a lot that the Secret Service has to answer for in this stunning security failure. But I do want to follow up on Mr. Abate's testimony that an online profile of the shooter may have been found, and you said it contains anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant postings. Can you elaborate? Have you found anything further in the shooter's profile?
Senator, this was just discovered, as I mentioned, and it's being closely analyzed right now. We need to verify that it is, in fact, that it belonged to the now deceased shooter and that he made these comments. So that's why I felt it important in the interest of transparency to share that here, but add the caveat that we still have a lot of work to do, which we're working on quickly to determine that. It's of importance, I think, because if it is in fact the shooter that posted these comments, it's the first real indication where he's expressing what are described as extremist views and talking about political violence.
I take it that once you determine that it was in fact the shooter who posted these kinds of comments, that you will let the public know as well as this committee?
Absolutely, Senator.
I think, in fact, it is very important that many of the perpetrators of mass shootings, etc., have these kinds of postings online that are very anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, anti-everything. And it is really important as we determine the kind of profile for many of these shooters that we understand how critical it is that we are careful, how critically important it is that people are careful about what they're posting online, the misinformation, disinformation, everything else along those lines. This is for Mr. Abate once again. What kind of firearm, what kind of weapon did Crooks use in the assassination attempt?
This was an AR-15 style rifle manufactured by a company named Panther Arms.
And once again, many of the persons involved in these kinds of mass shootings use this particular kind of weapon. We know from similar hearings that the Judiciary Committee has had that we are a nation awash in guns. In your view, shouldn't we be doing more to prevent the easy accessibility of these kinds of firearms in our country?
Senator, we're focused on collecting the facts here, and I'm not going to comment on something like that.
Well, I know that there is a hesitancy to ask about firearms and all of that, and I should think that as a law enforcement person that you probably have some opinions along those lines, but you don't want to articulate what to many people in our country. There's a causal factor here, the easy accessibility of guns, and I want to ask that question because I think it's important that the American people understand that we are a nation that is awash in guns, and we have more mass shootings than any other country, and yet we have been unable to pass the kind of laws that prevent these kinds of firearms to be easily available, that we have not done enough to promote gun safety in our country. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to articulate that as the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address, including apparently our law enforcement officers. I am disappointed in that, but obviously we have work to do to create a much safer environment and to prevent persons who have these kinds of ideological perspectives and who are, I would say, who have these kinds of profiles to have such easy accessibility to the kind of firearms that can cause mass death and destruction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford, recognized for your questions.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you to both of you for the testimony today. Director Rowe, future Vice President J.D. Vance was in my state this past week in Oklahoma City. I talked with some of the Secret Service folks that are there. They're doing a terrific job. I got a chance to be able to thank them personally for the tasks they're doing, and I know the Oklahoma folks in Secret Service, and they're very dedicated, incredibly sharp people on that team. So I know this is a challenge to all Secret Service. This is something every Secret Service agent wakes up every single day and wants to avoid. So please continue to be able to pass on our gratitude for the work they do every single day and for what's happening out there. So I appreciate that. Mr. Bate, I want to ask you about some of the interviews that happened. Y'all have done more than 400 interviews at this point. For the counter sniper team that was local law enforcement that was on the second floor overlooking that rooftop, have they been interviewed at this point?
Yes, Senator, I believe that each of them have been interviewed.
Do you know offhand if they were at their post at that time, able to look across that? They were at that post, and sometimes do we know they were at that post at 6:08 to 6:11?
My understanding, and I want to be fair, I have not read the reports directly, but I've been briefed on some of it. They were at times during the time frame we're talking about here on post within the AGR building, and I do believe, but I would want to confirm this at some point, one or more did venture out in an effort to locate and isolate the.
We understand from the timeline that they were also looking for this individual that was suspicious, that they had left that post to be able to try to look for him on the ground at different points to try to be able to see if they could get a different perspective. What we're trying to figure out is during that time period that he actually climbed on the roof, assembled a firearm or took a firearm with him or picked one up, whatever it might have been there, that they were able to actually see him if they were able to look left, as been acknowledged in the photos that are up there.
Senator, I don't know the exact timing and the movements of each officer that was out there, but what I would derive from it is they were all focused on locating this shooter, the suspicious person at the time. And then, as we've all seen, the one officer attempted to get on the roof directly. There were efforts going on in those final minutes on the video to try to get to this person.
We've got one officer being boosted up by another officer to look up on the roof because people on the ground had said there's someone up there and they have a gun that's crawling on that roof. And so they climbed up to be able to see it. He turned around with a rifle. He came down. And then at that point, he gets on a local radio that he has and says there's someone on the roof with a gun. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator, I believe that's accurate.
So what's the rest of the radio communication? We've heard that first call in. We know it's about 30 seconds from the time he called in till the actual first shot rang out. What else was discussed on the radio during that 30-second time period?
Senator, we have the radio communications. The local radio communications were recorded and captured, and we do have that as part of the investigation. The key points to me, that local officer communicating that he sees the individuals, he's armed, that's at about 6:11 in some seconds, I think it's 3 seconds, and then he identifies it as a long gun at about 6:11 and 11 seconds. And the shots, which all happen quickly together, I believe happened within probably 30 seconds.
So we're talking about over the radio because there's a command center there.
Yes.
Where all radios, including the local, as they're all being listened to try to be able to review. There's a statement that has the word gun in it that's coming out across the radio. We only know that first communication. We don't know what came back and forth on that. We'd like to get transcripts of that conversation that was done in local law enforcement. But coming into that command center, there's also the word gun coming through one of the radio frequencies. I would think that would be communicated pretty quickly to everybody across the spectrum. 30 seconds is not long, but that's an NFL play plus a huddle plus the next play. I mean, that's quite a bit of time still to be able to respond. When Secret Service moved to be able to protect the president once the first shots were fired, within 2 seconds, they're gathered around him. So we're trying to be able to figure out where the word gun got lost in radio communication here and what else was said.
Certainly, we will share the communications with you and the committees, Senator. I will note, just from my notes, there was effort within those minutes and seconds once the gun was announced. There's other communications where the local police are talking about deploying a QRF and responding, and that they've got the building surrounded. So it's not in a void. I don't want to give you the misimpression.
Right, I understand, but typically I would assume for Secret Service, if they hear over the radio over something gun, they're moving to be able to protect the detailee, the person they're protecting at that point, the protectee, that they're moving pretty quickly at that point if that's what's actually coming out. And so that's what I'm trying to be able to figure out, how that didn't get communicated out to the people that were directly in front of the former president at that point. And the last question I'd have, I only have a second left, is just, was there any overhead drone? We've talked about counter drone, but any visibility that Secret Service had to be able to see the field and all the operation in their own ability?
No, sir. And as was asked by another senator earlier, it appears that there was an offer by a state or local agency to fly a drone on our behalf, and I'm getting to the bottom as to why we turned that down.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Kennedy, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, am I saying your name right?
Yes, Senator, thank you.
You are the Deputy Director of the FBI, is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is there any doubt in your mind, or in the collective mind of the FBI, that President Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet fired by the assassin crooks?
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind
It
whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet,
Wounded.
and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay.
I've been part of this investigation since the very beginning, and that has never been raised.
You're sure?
Yes.
It wasn't a space laser.
No.
It wasn't a murder hornet.
Absolutely not.
It wasn't Sasquatch.
No, Senator.
It was a bullet
It was a bullet, Senator.
fired by crooks
Yes, sir.
that hit President Trump in the ear and almost killed him.
100%, Senator.
Okay, glad we cleared that up. I don't want to get off the subject here. Did the FBI just settle 2 lawsuits, one wholly, one in part, in which the FBI agreed to give Peter Strzok $1.2 million and Ms. Lisa Page $800,000?
It's my understanding, Senator, that the Department of Justice was involved in that, not the FBI.
The FBI had nothing to do with it?
There may have been consultation with our general counsel's office, but
Does the FBI have to sign off on it?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so, but I would want to confirm that.
I would like you to, this would be the same Lisa Page who said to Mr. Strzok, quote, Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? To which Mr. Strzok said, quote, no, he won't. We will stop it. That's the Peter Strzok and Lisa Page I'm talking about. I need to know if the FBI signed off on this lawsuit.
We will get that answer for you, Senator.
And then I need to know who signed off on it. Did you sign off on it?
I absolutely did not and would never sign off on something
Did Chris
like that.
Wray sign off on it, the settlement?
I don't believe he did.
Okay. Did any, you don't know what?
Nor do I think he would have.
You need to let me know who signed off on this, if anyone at the FBI. So it was Merrick Garland who agreed to do this, is that right?
Senator, I do not know.
Well, hell,
who signed
somebody
off
had
on
to
that.
agree to it. I've settled a lawsuit before. The client's got to agree to it. You're the client.
Exactly.
Understood. I'm
Exactly.
going to direct in to the Department of Justice to answer those questions.
Get me
That's-
that information if you would. Mr. Rowe, help me understand this. The assassin Crooks fired his first shot, as I understand it, at 6:12 p.m. He was about 150 yards away. It's been reported that the snipers, the government snipers, saw him on the roof 20 minutes before. Not 2 minutes. 20 minutes before. Is that correct?
Senator, that's the first time I'm hearing this. That is not correct based on the information I have right now, sir.
Well, when did the FBI snipers see him on the roof?
Just Secret Service sniper, sir. I mean,
I'm sorry, you're right.
that's an
Secret
insult,
Service
sir.
sniper.
No, I'm just kidding.
I understand. I apologize. When did the Secret Service snipers, one of whom ultimately shot the assassin Crooks, first see him on that roof?
So, sir, immediately upon the shots being fired, our snipers.
I know that, but when did they first see him? You got a guy lying on a roof.
Yeah.
You got snipers in an elevated position. They can look down on the roof. You got the guy lying there with a gun pointed at the former president of the United States. And and they shot him. Good for them. He's now dead as Woodrow Wilson, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry. God forgive me, but it's a good thing. But when did the snipers first see him?
As soon as he presented himself as a target and a threat to the president, sir.
And when was that?
He fires initially a volley. I believe it was 3 shots.
No, he fired at 6:12 p.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the first shot.
So within 15.5 seconds of the first shot, he's
Here's what
neutralized.
people are asking.
Yes, sir.
He was up. Crooks was up there. the snipers at some point saw him,
Yes, sir.
our snipers, because they killed him.
Yes, sir.
When did they first see him? It has been reported repeatedly that the snipers first saw him 20 minutes before. That's more than a quarter in an NFL football game.
Yes, sir.
You don't know the answer?
So I do know the answer, sir. I'm telling you that.
What is the answer?
No,
When
they did not see him. They only
They never saw him.
No, sir.
Well,
did not.
how could they not see the guy? How could they not see him? They're in an elevated position. They're checking rooftops. They're looking around.
Yes,
There's
sir.
2 government snipers. How could they not see him? There he was, big as Dallas, lying there with a gun pointed at the president. How could they not see him?
Like a turd in a
He
toilet
was
bowl.
obscured
Yeah.
by that roof, sir. He did not pop up.
The roof is flat with ridges.
He's below the line where they would have seen him, sir. There is he did have concealment. I'm not going to say it's cover. He did have concealment, and then ultimately gets into firing position and fires. And within 15.5 seconds of his first shot, he's neutralized.
I've gone way over. You gentlemen need to answer these questions. Mr. Deputy Director, get me that information about those lawsuits.
Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Chair Peters, and Ranking Member Paul for holding this important hearing on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. I am grateful for everyone's service and dedication. However, it's critical that this committee get to the bottom of what happened that day so that we can prevent any future catastrophic security failures and ensure that nothing like this happens again. And so, Director Rowe, given that the event took place in a rural area, we've talked a lot about connectivity issues. Was law enforcement at a disadvantage due to a lack of or limited connectivity? And why has the Secret Service not adopted a dedicated satellite-enabled Wi-Fi connection which would facilitate integrated communication, enable device connectivity to include drones, and allowing for the sharing of real-time intelligence?
Exactly.
Senator, thank you for that question. So, based on what I've
And that is so easy to obtain, and you would think a government as powerful and as strong as America is, that'd be proper protocol. There's some loose ends that people are questioning of the intent of whether or not this was gross negligence or they intended for this to be gross negligence. That's what this hearing is all about.
that radio connectivity, cellular was an issue that day. With respect to the satellite broadband, that is something that I've tasked our CIO, and then we're getting some support from the Department of Homeland Security on. So we will start to leverage whatever asset we have to ensure that connectivity.
Well, I can tell you that we have those SEER ratings in Homeland Security, those special event ratings that we have for things like the Super Bowl. We have it a lot in Las Vegas, and they do bring these mobile units to be sure that we have all the dedicated Wi-Fi cell service and integration that is absolutely necessary for securing a huge event.
Exactly.
And so I look forward to hearing about that. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about intelligence for lone wolf actors, because
they got even telescopes that'll go up 25, 30 feet up in the air. It's got a little box on it that basically homes in to their headquarters. That even a festival up here in Middle Tennessee, at Bell Buckle, Tennessee, that has every year, because there's so many people there, that Homeland Security is there to make sure that they keep an eye on everything, because they've got like ATM machines set up on like every corner, and it's a multi-million-dollar event. Actually, I think it's one of the second largest events in the state of Tennessee, other than the homecoming. So we know that they have proper tools and methods of being able to make sure that everything is handled properly. How come it wasn't handled properly on that particular day?
we have not been made aware of any specific intelligence the Secret Service or others had in the shooter before the event. We do know that we have intel on Iranian threats against the former president. And so again, Acting Director Rowe, could you talk to us about how you utilize intelligence collection as a way of mitigating threats from state actors like Iran compared to what you do, compared to lone wolf actors, what it seems to be like the attempted assassin that we have here in Crooks. And so, and what are the specific challenges with the intelligence collection as a mitigation tool against lone wolf actors versus state actors?
So Senator, first let me preface by saying the Secret Service is not a member of the intelligence community. However, we are their biggest consumers of information, and we receive that information regularly, especially as it pertains to our protective mission and the people that we protect. We have embeds with the FBI through their National Joint Terrorism Task Forces. Our agents are basically embeds and are able to not only receive information but also follow up on investigations that may have a nexus or a direction of interest towards one of our protectees. We have an excellent working relationship with the FBI. We have an excellent working relationship with the intelligence community. We are not collectors. We are consumers of finished analytic products that the intelligence community of the FBI produces. We ingest them, and then we use that to adjust our protective posture. And we do this daily, weekly, all of the time. And it's not only for protective, for protectees, but also the events and sites that we protect on a permanent or temporary basis. With respect to largely a lot of the people that come to our attention, and in the case of the assailant, to me, as I overlay him over top of, say, John Hinckley, who tried to shoot President Reagan, I see an individual based on information that I have now, some of the great work that the FBI has done. We have an individual who's a loner. We have an individual who was focused on Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Hinckley traveled the 80 campaign, and we know that he followed President Carter. It just, on March of 81, he happened to show up in Washington, D.C., and he saw an opportunity to try to attack President Reagan. So when it comes to the Secret Service, and 1981 was a watershed moment for us. We have people that are, for whatever reason, fixated on carrying out an attack against the President of the United States or one of our protectees. And in this instance, you have the assailant.
Yeah, they're called celebrity hounds. And they know that if they can take out somebody as important as a president or a pope or even John Lennon with the Beatles or some other popular person, that's instantaneously going to make that person just as popular, if not more popular, than what the person that they assassinated. It's called celebrity hounds. You got them all over the world. People wanting to cheat their way up to the top. People that are evil. People that are demented. People that wants to bring harm and hurt and destruction into society. Evil.
Who was a loner. Obviously, he was researching. He had researched the Democratic National Convention. He had researched and Googled or used a search engine about the president, the former president. And so I think he had moved towards an idea that he was going to try to do something. And so when I look at this, we don't have a challenge with the FBI or the intelligence community. I think what we always try to wrestle with is trying to line up and see people as they're starting to head down a pathway towards violence. And it's something that we have spent a lot of time and resources in with our National Threat Assessment Center to try to gain a better understanding so that we can help our agents in the field as they're doing these protective intelligence cases and these investigations to be able to make a determination, is somebody genuinely a threat, or do they need mental health, or do they need some other type of service?
Thank you. I appreciate that. My time's over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. You're recognized for your questions.
At the outset, I want to express, as many members have, as President Trump did, the admiration and respect for the bravery and skill of the officers who were on site that day, Secret Service officers, as well as all the local law enforcement. As it happened, my 9-year-old son was watching with me that afternoon, and it's hard to get him to turn away from it. And he asked who all those men and women were who jumped on Mr. Trump. And I said, in layman's terms, those are his bodyguards. And he said, what are they doing? I said, they're protecting him from a bullet. And he said, actually? And I said, yes. He said, for real? And I said, yes. And it was hard for him to process that. But as a reminder, I told him that there are men and women in the Secret Service, in law enforcement, in the military who are willing to die for our country. And it's an important lesson, I think, that everyone should take away from this. That you had very brave men and women on the ground there who were doing their job to protect this country, to protect a former president and a nominee for president, as they do every day for so many other protectees. Obviously, there were failures in the planning and preparation for this event. Mr. Rowe, we've heard that the shooter had a golf rangefinder. Was that not on the list of prohibited items at an event like this?
Currently, it is not on the list of prohibitive items, but we're going to make that change, Senator.
John Kennedy can't get into an LSU football game with a flask.
Yeah, I can.
Well, he probably can, but he's not supposed to. It just seems like common sense that you don't need a laser rangefinder at an event like this. And it feels like that a lot of that was just the lack of common sense being exercised. Are officers not empowered on the front line to use common sense to say, like, if a guy has a laser rangefinder, he should be detained, or at least stopped, and that's why he's carrying it around. If you have a building like this that's not secure from 150 meters away, someone, even the front line, lowest level, most junior officer, should be able to kind of like send up the red flag immediately and say, like, we need to halt everything right now and figure out what the hell is going on. I mean, do officers not feel empowered to use that kind of common sense?
I would hope they would, Senator. I can tell you from our uniform division officers that run our magnetometer screening, they do a tremendous job. And even though something may or may not be on the prohibitive items list, they're well trained and they do exercise that good common sense.
And you want this important message. Okay, I want every one of your officers all around the country to hear that their acting director wants them to exercise common sense. It doesn't have to be policy or protocol or procedure. They should exercise common sense. Thank you for that. So it was reported right before Ms. Cheadle's hearing last week that, in fact, President Trump's detail had requested more resources and those had been denied. She said that she did not deny those resources. You testified this morning that you did not either. So who did? I mean, the Secret Service is not the post office. It's not this vast bureaucracy.
Right.
Like, I'm not surprised to hear that you knew the counter sniper. It's a small agency and you have a lot of career officers. Like, surely you've gotten to the bottom by now on whose desk this request landed and who denied it.
So, Senator, sometimes when they make a request, they may not have the asset available. For example, there may be, instead of the detail may say, hey, we want 15 magnetometers. Well, we'll look at it based on what the event size. We'll say, listen, we're going to send 10 based on our protocols of screening so many. We have a flow rate of how many people we can put through. When it comes to a counter sniper or something like that, because I know that's been the subject of some media reporting where they have requested counter snipers. We do have a finite number of counter snipers. And so what we try to do is, if we cannot fill that asset, and that's where we'll say, hey, we can't fill this assignment. However, through the field office, they will use local law enforcement resources. And so in those situations, for example, in the one that has been the subject of a lot of reporting with Pickens, South Carolina, they in fact did use local assets to be able to do that. And there were 3 counter sniper teams. One of them was formerly with the Secret Service Uniform Division. And so they actually used the same practices that we use. So it's not that there was a drop in the capability. They actually use the best practices that we would use. So the asset may be denied by Secret Service between the war room and that conversation with the detail in the field, but that doesn't equate to a vulnerability or a gap.
Okay, one final question about the Iran threat. As you know, Iran made credible threats against several former Trump administration officials, many of whom still have government provided security details to this day. Ms. Cheadle removed Secret Service protection from Robert O'Brien last year. Were you involved in that decision?
So, Senator, he was a memorandum protectee, meaning that the president authorized protection for him. We do not weigh in on who gets protection.
Why? So you're still protecting some others. I won't reveal their names. But you are still protecting others, and other personal security offices in the federal government are protecting others. Other officials don't reveal their names. Like who made the decision that Robert O'Brien no longer needed a security detail, despite Iran's ongoing credible threats?
So I can tell you, sir, it wasn't the Secret Service. We don't factor into that decision.
Can you take a look at why that happened now that you're in charge, and consider the possibility that he might still need that protection, given all of his counterparts in the Trump administration still have protection?
I will do so, Senator.
Just go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would have said, like, again, I'm not going to reveal the protective details, but I'm pretty confident that the agency can get this done. And I think it needs to get done if you look at the kind of ongoing threats that he and all these others face.
Yeah. I will, sir.
Despite all the resource constraints we talked about today, he's not the president of the United States. He doesn't have an 18-car motorcade, nor do any of the others. I think he needs that protective detail. And now that you're in charge, I'm asking you to take a new look at that, and also talk to your supervisors inside the department about whether you can spare just that small, limited amount of resources. Okay,
Senator Welch, you're recognized for your question.
I will, sir.
Thank you very much. There's, first of all, thank you both for the tremendous work you do and for all the folks behind you and under you. So thank you for that. I kind of want to follow up a little bit on Senator Cotton. There's three issues that have been raised. One is the selection of who gets protection, and you've addressed that just now. The other is whether it's a budget issue, which I don't necessarily think it is. But then there's the operational question. Was this an operational failure? And it appears to me that's where the focus should be. And one of the issues on the operations is the capacity of people who are part of the team, both the Secret Service and also the local law enforcement, their capacity to act on what they see. And this is what Senator Cotton, I think, was talking about with common sense. You mentioned that the sniper was authorized immediately to act. He wasn't checking in with anyone, right? And he took out the shooter as quickly as he could. But according to the timeline, you had local law enforcement captured 2 photographs of the shooter at 5:10. At 5:32, local law enforcement officers spot a suspicious person who turned out to be the shooter with a phone and a rangefinder. At 5:46, the alert was so significant that snipers text photo of the shooter from where he was initially spotted to the USS lead sniper. I mean, how is it that where you had these experienced law enforcement people who understood the gravity of the responsibility of protecting the presidential candidate, the former president, none of these actionable observations resulted in action? I'll direct that first to you, Deputy Director Abate.
Thank you, Senator. From the FBI standpoint, we're simply collecting the facts. We've interviewed most of the officers. Now we'll end up interviewing all of them.
Okay, we'll go to Assistant Director, or Deputy Director Rowe.
So on that, Senator, I think there was a sense of this guy is standing out, and that's why he came to the attention of local law enforcement.
No, I get that. That's my point.
Right.
He did stand out.
Correct.
But nothing happened.
Well,
there were alerts.
There were alerts.
There was you've got somebody suspicious. Why didn't somebody go interact with the suspicious person, right away?
And they were attempting to locate him. I can't answer that question as to why, if they took a picture of him and they thought he was unusual, suspicious, not acting normal, why there wasn't. And I think, again, there was probably an assumption on the part of that officer that took that picture that, some uniform or somebody will go eventually and walk up to this.
Well, see, that's what seems like an operational failure. Somebody else will do it. So, is the responsibility of an officer to alert some other officer that they think somebody might be suspicious, or the first officer who sees a suspicious person can take the next step to actually engage that person, or talk to someone very, very close to it and say engage that person. And this guy was wandering around for quite a while.
He was. I can't put myself in the mind of that officer.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking, this is operationally, how does the process work? Okay, so that is the job of the leaders as opposed to the officers. Are they empowered to act immediately upon the observation of someone who looks very suspicious, particularly when they've got the rangefinder? They were in a place where it really wasn't about seeing the rally. It was, as we see, it was a place where you get a good view of former President Trump. I mean, that is a leadership issue, right?
So, Senator, that officer didn't work for me. That was a state and local officer that made that observation, took that picture. I can tell you from the Secret Service perspective, and we do this routinely, is that when people come to our attention, we locate them, we go up, we do a field interview, or we try to do a consensual encounter.
That's the operational thing that I'm talking about. If you do it within Secret Service, you all are in charge, and you are relying on local law enforcement assets. Those folks, and they did their job here up to a point where they identified this person, passed information along, but nobody acted. The empowerment to that local officer, I would think, has to come be transmitted through the Secret Service, maybe in the earlier briefings, but where you say, folks, you see somebody suspicious, you engage that suspicious person.
I don't disagree, Senator, and it goes back to my comments at the beginning of the hearing that we need to be very direct to our local law enforcement counterparts so that they understand exactly what their expectations.
I yield back. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Tillis, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abate, Mr. Rowe, thank you for being here. Mr. Rowe, do you have a picture? I was watching your testimony earlier. Do you have a photograph of the vantage point from the Secret Service snipers?
I do. Let's see.
And there were two, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Stage left and stage right.
Okay. And I don't know if you have a vantage point of both of them or not. I know you had one for the one who ultimately shot the.
That's the vantage point of the sniper who neutralized the assailant.
Okay. Well, is it a similar vantage point for the other? Would they have also been impaired in terms of actually seeing him until he popped his head up?
So the sniper on the stage right side, yeah. Senator, they had an obstructive view because of that tree.
They had an obstructive view. Okay, so the one thing in this discussion that I don't believe that a sniper saw someone on the roof 20 minutes before just doesn't make sense to me. It sounds like the one who took the shot probably saw him for the first time about a split second before he pulled the trigger. Is
that's my assessment, Senator.
I'm more, well, first off, I'd like to clarify the requests that have been made of a lot of people so that we get the information in a good form. I think it would be helpful, at least all the way back to, I think, November 5th of 2022, I believe, when President Trump announced that he was running for re-election. I think it'd be helpful if we could just get a matrix of any request for additional security, the resolution of that request. Was it honored? Was it denied? Was it downsized? If you could give us that, I think that's going to be the best way versus giving us mounds and mounds of paper. If you can do that, I know you're looking at the same thing. I've heard from you that any subsequent requests from field requests are being honored. I believe that's true. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm more worried about the 24 to 30 seconds between the time I believe local law enforcement officer was hoisted on the shoulders of another police officer, saw a person armed less than 200 yards away from the president, who I believe jumped down. What happened in those 24 or 30 seconds? I mean, now obviously there's no such thing as a panic button. The first thing you'd think is you hit panic, you cover the president, get him off stage. None of that happened. What happened? Is it just that I hear a text message what actually happened in the 30 seconds where a law enforcement officer knew that a gun was pointed in the direction of the president from a fairly short range. What actually did those folks who did have knowledge of exactly what was happening and could probably infer what was about to happen, what did they do? And Mr. Abate or Mr. Rowe, either one, based on your interviews.
Thank you, Senator. From the interviews, the officers in the immediate vicinity were operating with urgency at that point to get to this person, but he was on the roof. The officer who had looked over the edge, based on what I've been told, the shooter turned toward him with the rifle. That's what the officer observed. So he was under threat himself in that second. So he had to retreat and step down and get back to the ground in order to protect himself and keep him safe from potential rifle fire. But once he got to the ground, along with other officers, there were Butler County local officers, Pennsylvania State Police. They were moving around trying to find something to get to this guy.
We've got an operational problem here because we had more than 20 seconds to have somehow cut through all the crap and the communications, whatever impediments there were, have to be removed. I mean, it's pretty clear to me. First off, that law enforcement officer, I love law enforcement. I wear the back of the blue pin every day. They do great work. Secret Service did phenomenal work on the stage, but they failed because their job is to protect the public, and they needed to put themselves in harm's way to stop him. Now, I'll let the interviews go through, but there was a massive failure. There were at least 2 law enforcement officers that knew a guy was about to pull the trigger at the president, and I'm just not really happy with the fact that we couldn't have communicated, covered President Trump, and tried to secure the situation. I'm going to let the investigation go through, but I think it's go forward. I think it's very important to point out that we can't let a scenario go in the future where 20 seconds can lapse when a law enforcement officer within 2 football fields of a former president of the United States has material knowledge that somebody's about to get shot at on stage, and we don't have instantaneous response. In the old days, maybe you just shoot a gun in the air. I know for a lot of reasons why they didn't do that, but there had to be some way to actually defuse that situation. It didn't happen on July the 13th. I just want to end by saying, Mr. Rowe, I think you've been forthcoming in your answers. I know you're frustrated. I've seen you twice now. You're clearly embarrassed by what happened. You don't think there's any reasonable explanation. And to my colleagues who are worried about communications, they should spend times in their local government and state legislatures to understand just how bad communication is between law enforcement and first responders. We need to invest in this infrastructure. That was also a part of the failure. But if you can please get to me and get to this committee a chronology of requests, accepted, denied, and the reasons for, I think that's going to be very helpful.
I will, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Blackburn, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for your patience and for being here today. Director Rowe, I want to come to you first because a counter sniper has decided to speak out about the culture at your agency, and I think it is very telling. And he sent an email, and I'm going to quote from that. If this agency needs to change, and if not now, when? The next assassination in 30 days? But here's what I want to talk with you about, because in this email, he says, and I'm quoting again, the motto of the USSS is CYA. And every supervisor is doing it now. That's the end of his quote. So you're the guy in charge. And you're one of those supervisors. You've been a career guy there at the Secret Service. The public has lost trust in the ability to execute the mission, to protect. And I want to know how you feel about the fact that employees in your agency are worried about covering their behind and not worried about protecting a former president.
Thank you, Senator. So I am hurt by that email, but not in the way you think I'm saying it. I'm hurt because my people are hurting right now. We need them.
Then why did somebody delete the email?
I'll get back to you on that,
The
Senator.
agency deleted the email.
But look, may I address your question? And,
Yes,
and,
please.
I will get back to you as to whether
Yes.
the email is deleted or not. My agency is hurting. Emotions are raw. I actually want to hear more from that duty officer, that technician. In his email, he referenced that he had spent time serving our nation as a United States Marine, that he is a 20-year professional of the Secret Service. I am committed to being a change agent, meaning I am committed to reviewing some of these things. I looked at the points in his email very quickly. I saw it as I was on my way over here this morning. I want to have further conversations, not only with him, but also the counter sniper supervisor.
If I may step back in, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you want to talk with him. What about other whistleblowers? What about this culture? Are you going to allow these whistleblowers to speak out? Because it is troublesome if somebody went into the server and deleted that email. I would hope you will get to the bottom of that and be able to provide some answers. Because this is, as you have heard from both sides, this is a situation that cannot be allowed to happen again.
Yes, ma'am.
Ever. Mr. Abate, and am I saying your name properly? We've heard it pronounced 3 different ways today in the hearing.
Abate, Senator.
Abate, okay.
Thank you.
You had mentioned a social media account that espoused anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic views, but you did not say what platform that was on and what the username was. And this is Crooks that we're discussing.
Yes, Senator, that's correct. I didn't want to comment on it because we haven't fully confirmed yet, and I thought that as soon as we confirm and certify,
Would
I
you
will
supply
provide
that?
to you.
And
Absolutely.
also the age at which he had those feelings. And then we understand that the Gab account is pro-immigration, pro-lockdown, leftist views. Is that accurate?
I haven't seen it directly, but I believe from what I've been told, that is accurate. With the Gab account, we're also, though that's been publicly revealed through the CIO and other things, we're still working to certify and verify that that's his account also, but it does have differing points of view, it would appear.
Okay. And what age and how fresh is that Gab account?
The Gab account, based on my recollection, the comments in there or the messaging is from about 2021, I believe.
Okay. And the other preceded that? Maybe he was age 14?
Yes, Senator. The other account that we talked about was in the 2019-2020 timeframe, so it would have been in the couple years right before the Gab
Right
messaging.
before that.
Yes.
Are there other accounts that you all are currently verifying and receiving information from?
We are. We've, as I mentioned, we've issued a bunch of legal process, and we're still awaiting returns from a number of the companies, to include other social media companies as well.
Okay. Well, my time has expired. Thank you for your patience today. Thank you for the information. We look forward to getting more information, and Director Rowe, we are going to hold you to being a change agent because things at the Secret Service absolutely have to change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony here today. Certainly what happened on July 13th could and should have been prevented from what I have heard today. I'm certainly grateful to our witnesses for their candid answers and for helping to provide additional clarity and new information about the circumstances surrounding this attack. Acting Director Rowe, some of what you have said today conflicts with information and accounts that we have received from local law enforcement that we've had the opportunity to talk with. They have been voluntarily and I will say expeditiously cooperating with our bipartisan investigation, which we certainly appreciate. But we now need to speak with Secret Service agents directly, who are directly involved And I would say that you need to make them available as soon as possible. Those interviews can't start weeks from now or months from now. Time is of the essence when memories are fresh and you can get the information that is most important to us. So my question for you as we wrap up this hearing, Actor Director Rowe, will you commit to having those agents available for this committee to interview as soon as possible in a matter of days, not weeks, matter of days?
Hello, I'm Chris Jansing. For more than 3 hours, a fiery hearing on Capitol Hill that went on and on, asking so many questions, senators lashing out at law enforcement officials for what they described as inexcusable and indefensible gaps in security that led to the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. The acting head of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, admitting that the incident was a failure on multiple levels. But Rowe, along with FBI Deputy Director Paula Bate, also admitted that 17 days after the incident, they're still working to fill in the gaps surrounding critical questions. Those include the gunman's motive and why more than an hour was allowed to pass between when 20-year-old Thomas Crooks was identified as a suspicious person and he opened fire on the former president. Republican Senator Mike Lee asking about what happened right before the shots rang out.
I want to know what you can tell me about what happened during that final 2-minute period where a whole bunch of people in the crowd saw and were shouting, "He's got a gun."
No information regarding a weapon on the roof was ever passed to our personnel.
How is that even possible?
I want to bring in NBC's Julie Sirkin, who's covering the hearing on Capitol Hill. Bobby McDonald is retired supervisory special agent with the U.S. Secret Service and a lecturer on criminal justice at the University of New Haven. With me here in studio, NBC national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, I mean, how is that even possible? Seemed to be the question of the day. If I had a word to describe what I heard, it was incredulous. But what did we actually learn?
Right. If you're watching MSNBC at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, the exact questions we were hoping that senators would get to are the exact questions that were asked. And I think it's now provided yet more questions about this incident specific to that gap of time. We now know, based on the testimony provided here today, there's a critical 30-second period where local law enforcement hears from their own people, because they saw him with their own eyes, this guy's got a gun. And from that moment until the moment shots ring out, there's an approximately 30-second gap. And the ultimate question here, that is apparently, according to the testimony today, radioed out. So at some point, it is actually communicated, not just that they saw them, but it was radioed out on their radio frequencies, local law enforcement, that this person is on a roof with a gun. What happens from there is the critical question. And I don't think we really got the answer today, because we know that there's a...
I can give you the answer. I've already done given the answer. We are not fighting against flesh and blood, but principalities pertaining to higher powers. That was a move by a demonic figure that had stifled communications to the degree of causing either chaotic moment of not communicating in one form or fashion, that within that time frame, if that boy would have been a better shot, we would now be going to the rotunda of a prior president being killed. But not only would that had occurred pertaining to the rotunda, we would probably be going through massive hysteria of rioting on our streets, of thinking or believing that this was in fact an inside job pertaining to the Democrat Party versus the Republican Party that would basically, I ain't going to say it would finish us off, but it could possibly reach the level of martial law that would displace our way of life here in America. And really and truly, January the 6th was supposed to have done that, and would have done that if it was more organized and coordinated. If January the 6th was more organized and coordinated, we would have first of all seen a bloodbath right there in the Capitol one of our most sacred buildings. But secondly, it would have been a landslide of other events happening to the degree of total chaos if January the 6th would have fulfilled itself the way that it was supposed to have fulfilled itself. Which puts me at this spot. America is still under the grace of God. America is still being protected by God. But just because we're protected by God does not mean that these evil, demonic, wicked spirits working through various situations and people are not going to get pot shots off in trying to bring America down to its knees. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Don't think for a second, just because God is on our side, that's going to eliminate the danger and the fear factor of our adversary that can get pot shots off at any given time. We have reached a pivotal point in America with all this social media, broadcasting. Once more, a telephone originally was created for communication. It was a form of communicating. Now people has turned the very substance of the telephone into entertainment in one form or the other, or they've turned it into a business tool, or they've turned it into a weapon. Because of these substances that has now been introduced into our lives, from a human perspective, we are having difficulty in wrapping our heads around this stuff, in understanding just exactly what the hell is going on and how is it going on. The way that it's going on is through a demonic figure, through a supernatural entity that is trying every way imaginable in tearing America apart. And that's what our other enemies at bay, rather not they be Russia, Venezuela, or parts of South America, or China, or North Korea, or whatever, are sitting back laying wait for. They're just laying wait to see us basically destroy ourselves. And once we become so weakened and so depleted, then the enemy will come in and take over to where the fight won't be near as much of a fight. And then we'll see the red, white, and blue flag fall to the ground. And we will see a different flag, a different governmental shit raise up pertaining to a new administration. People don't understand how critical and how close that we have become again and again and again towards seeing total chaos on our streets. And until we unify and until we figure out what we're up against and what we need to do to fight off these combatants, we're basically sitting ducks. We're sitting ducks. And you can't tell me that within that time frame, they're asking, how could that be? Logically speaking, it can't. It cannot be. Especially whenever the word gun had already been broadcasted over the airwaves. But supernaturally speaking, that's how it was done. Just like how come our United States military was not on top of their game after the first building fell of 9/11, of being in the sky and basically shooting down the second plane that was heading towards the second tower, even if I was in it. How come? based upon the pretense that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. How come? I'm going to tell you why. Because there was a delay. And you might be saying, well, that was a 45-minute delay. It was a 45-minute chaotic delay. That once more, we should have scrambled fire jets around New York City that would have instantaneously shot down anything even remotely coming close to that other building. But instead, we was setting ducks. We was setting ducks. And those buildings did not fall from a logical perspective of how can that be? They fell from a supernatural entity of causing them buildings to fall. Pancaking one on top of the other on top of the other. Just like, how can it be that our United States Air Force, working out of Hawaii on the peninsula out there, Pearl Harbor, that we had satellite capability that would almost be able to see a bird flying in the sky, could not see airplane crafts coming to that area that was set towards wanting to bring destruction and harm and hurt to the American people. How can that be? Logically, you can't answer that question. But supernaturally, you can answer it. Because these evil demonic spirits that are out to kill, steal, and destroy, which is the author of confusion, can take just as much control of those instruments, our data, our communication devices, than it can people, animals, and things. Now, the Bible says that the devil would sift you as wheat if he could. If he could. Indicating that he can't. But just because he can't don't mean that he's not going to take pot shots at you. We are dealing with stuff today that unless you really and truly have a strong faith in God, and unless you've had some sort of encounter of a supernatural effect, you can't conceive. You cannot mentally accept what is happening today. Which goes back to COVID. How could it be? Listen to me carefully. How could it be that we've seen satellite imagery of China building buildings, putting them up in hours or in days that should have took weeks or even years, knowing that there was something going on over there that wasn't right, it wasn't fitting in, and seeing people dying? How could it be that our agencies failed towards not shutting down aviation over in that area and making sure that that disease did not spread as wildly and as openly as it did? But it did. Cost the American people over 1 million lives. And that's just within a recorded stance of about 3 years. There ain't no telling how many other people died that we really will never know whether or not the repercussions was because of COVID or whatever. Maybe their lives was already dangling with health issues to begin with, and now all of a sudden, boom, bam, that person's dead. I lost some good friends over COVID. Some real dear, good friends. How can it be that a spy satellite, a balloon, that was seen coming from the area of Alaska, coming into parts of Canada, how can it be that we didn't engage and shoot the damn thing out of the sky before it ever got over the continental United States? But it did. But it did. Whenever the Bible talks about our enemy, our adversary that is out to kill, steal, and destroy, once more, Jesus Christ did not one time illustrate the enemy as him being fascist or some sort of comedian in some sort of humanitarian, some sort of funny type way. Christ 100% addressed Lucifer, the Antichrist, the devil, Satan, in the most sincerest form possible. You know why? Because Christ knew that this entity is evil and was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. And until we are reprogrammed pertaining to our military assistance, beginning at the top, all the way down to the bottom pertaining to our police forces, until we're reprogrammed in understanding that, we are setting ducks. Which could all be avoided if people would just get serious about the matters. I continue to tell my son, and I may not should say this, but I continue to tell my son that the reason why the South lost the war was because the South was not on top of their game, and the South did not take what was going on during the time that it was going on serious enough that they could have interacted with what was happening. And that's basically the same way with any other calamity, either a personal calamity or a family calamity or a nation calamity, is that, you know, the element of surprise is always in the perpetrator's favor towards doing something that you really wasn't expecting for it to ever be done, but it got done anyway. Kind of like taking them airplanes and turning them into missiles. Who in God's name would have thought that somebody would have been on a suicide mission, a kamikaze mission of taking regular passenger airplanes and turning them into missiles? But they did. Was that not a wake-up call for aviation? All over the world. And since then, everybody's airline tickets has went up because now we have fire marshals flying on every flight. When is the Homo sapiens down here on the planet going to awaken and realizing just exactly who and what type of enemy we're fighting up against? And it's really, really sad, because you would think by now, you know, since the existences of Adam and Eve, which goes back about 6,000 years or a little more, you would think by now that we would already be on to the devil's game. We would already be on to the snares and the entrapments that the devil puts out there for the Christians basically to fall for, or for the human race to fall for. Which leads me to one other thing. They was talking a while ago pertaining to the FBI and the Secret Service, of them being in conjunction with one another pertaining to their communications. You know, I just got through looking up less than 5 minutes before this program come on, pertaining to this hearing, of some stuff that's went on in my particular life, and I found WPSD in Paducah, Kentucky has put it up on their webpage pertaining to some of the accusations that has been made about my life going back into the past, and they're still broadcasting even to this day, locally, federally, whether or not it's in Kentucky, Tennessee, or Oklahoma, about how Dennis James Jackson threatened George Walter H. Bush's life. And I'm still flabbergasted by all this. And that was in what year? What year was that in? That I supposedly done this? 1991? 30 years has passed, knowing that I did not threaten that human being, especially the chief and commander of our great nation. Knowing that I was on my way to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness pertaining to the American government going to war with the wrong people over in the Middle East. And to this day, that information is still just as vulnerable of getting into the ears and eyes and the minds of people that will turn against Dennis James Jackson just as strongly today as what it was when it first got broadcasted and put out there on the internet. Just like the incident pertaining to me threatening Mr. Burns, Lieutenant Burns' life over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, over a telephone call. That information coming out of Channel 9 and Channel 11 News, all the local news stations in basically downtown Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, is still out there. That Dennis Jackson threatened an Oklahoma authority, knowing good and well that I'm sure even Mr. Burns himself has requested for that information to be ratified or taken plumb off the airwaves, and it's still out there. I've known all along the energy of evil and the entity of evil that I've been fighting up against. What has taken me by surprise is that my own people would have fought against me as hardly as they have. In the meantime, their ship is going down. Our country is $35+ trillion in debt. We've got all these problems going on that can't nobody solve. But yet no. The Windmill Ministries Missions, the founder of, which is speaking in behind the camera right now, can still not get no clear resolution towards. So it has reached a pivotal time in my personal life of not just digging in, not just hunkering down, talking about the Bible. The Bible says that in the last days the true worshipers will worship the Father in truth and in spirit, that the enemy will entrench you all around to the degree that you're basically defenseless. But our great nation is entrenched. For the Bible talks about that your house is left desolate. Now, it's not completely desolate yet, because if it was, I'm pretty sure we would be looking at the rotunda right now pertaining to the death of a prior president. But we are so close. I'm talking about a hairline fraction close to the degree that these pot shots that continue to not only keep coming my way, but keep coming in the direction towards destruction to America, are going to one day get lucky. And eventually there will be chaos. There will be anarchy. Which leads me to the next question. Has any of our government officials sat down and itemized in using metaphors in trying to figure out a game plan towards what are we going to do whenever that occurs? Because it's not a matter of if it's going to occur, it's a matter of when it's going to occur. Just like I put out in some of my material earlier, I think it was yesterday, that has anybody in Homeland Security, Secret Service sat down and idolized by sitting here watching TV and seeing 40, 50, maybe 100 people rush into a department store and go in there and basically snatch and grab any and everything that they can? Has anybody ever sat down and acknowledged the fact that you could take 25, 50 people with martial arts skills that are known of having lethal, deadly hands? Don't have to have a bow and arrow. Don't have to have a sword. Don't have to have a gun. We're talking about people that can kill you because they know where to hit and how to hit. Has anybody sat down and analyzed what if something like that was to occur on stage while one of our leaders was up there campaigning or talking? Has anybody programmed themselves towards, well, this is what we're going to do, not if it happens, but when it happens? Because that's the way that you make provisions in stopping things from happening, is believing that they will happen. It's kind of like maintenance in your automobile. It's not a matter of if I don't change my oil and maintenance my vehicle properly, that the motor will blow up. It's a matter of it will blow up. The motor will blow up if you don't maintenance your vehicle properly. And we know that now by using prevention tactics, same way with brushing your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth and take care of your hygiene, there's going to be consequences in your teeth falling out and you getting cavities, and the next thing you know, you wind up with dentures. We're going to have to wisen up pertaining to the forces of evil that not just the American people, but the world is facing off on. Because if we don't, what really rattles me is all these nuclear bombs and living in this nuclear age that we're living in right now. If one catastrophe was to happen, regardless whether it happened over in Ukraine area or happened in the Middle East or wherever, it could set off a chain of events that could basically destroy the face of the earth as we know it, that would make this planet totally uninhabitable. And don't say that it's not possible for that to happen. With all these breaches and all these failures and all these communication disasters that we're seeing now happening on basically it's almost now on a week-to-week basis. We're going to have to tighten up. We're going to have to get real. And we're going to have to realistically realize what we are doing, what we should be doing, and what we haven't been doing in preventing from more catastrophes like this that could have blown up into a major ordeal on a national level. I don't know why they didn't have government drones flying that day. I don't know why that building wasn't covered. I don't know why that within that time frame, and we're talking less than 60 seconds after it already went out, a gun being advertised over the airways. How come the president wasn't asked, sir, you need to step off stage? There is a danger among us. There's always danger, but is it acceptable danger? There's always going to be danger. We live on a dangerous planet. We live around dangerous people. We live around people that would give anything to basically start a nuclear third world war into the world scenario. Now, what are we doing in preventing those things from occurring? That's the $64,000 question. But yes, it should not have happened, but it did happen. So what is the explanation for it happening? I just gave it to you. I just gave you the explanation of why that time frame in a 30-second slot was basically confusion. Who is the author of confusion? Go back to your original core origin of your enemy, which is Lucifer, Satan.
Command post. There's an area where you have local law enforcement and the Secret Service sitting together. Those radios don't talk to each other. The Secret Service, not getting into a ton of detail that could compromise their ability to protect the people that are currently running for office, they run on an encrypted frequency. That's their own radio network. But the whole point of having a command post is so that you have the ability, local law enforcement, to turn to you, if I'm working for the Pennsylvania State Police and your Secret Service, Chris, to turn to you and say, hey, my guys are talking about the fact we've got somebody on a roof with a gun. For you then to relay that to the Secret Service so action can be taken. And I think the question here today remains, why wasn't action taken? Why wasn't Trump taken off the stage? Why didn't the Secret Service join him on the stage? Obviously, incredible bravery that the Secret Service is required to undertake in that situation, to put them between a bullet and the former president. But that is what is required. And I think that's something that they say they're still trying to find out. So that's something that jumped out at me today, as far as the fact that we know that there was a gap and that there was a radio communication that was made.
Let me stop you there, because I want to go to Bobby on that question, if I can, Bobby. So if you know that there is a man with a gun, who makes the decision to take the shot? If a sniper sees him, does he take the shot? Does he have to go through the command center? What happens, even if it's 30 seconds, is there SOP without revealing anything operational that could, as Tom rightly points out, endanger anybody in the future? What should happen here?
Good afternoon, Chris, and Tom is exactly right. I couldn't have explained the command post situation any better than he just did for that real-time information flow. Look, this is exactly the issue that's going to have to be cleaned up with the Secret Service. That information, especially with regard to a shooter within a situation that's only 150 yards away from the former president with a high-powered rifle that was seen by multiple people, multiple witnesses, multiple cell phone videos,
Exactly.
was able to get there and pull that shot off. That information through our command post mechanism should have been passed within seconds within that mechanism to various people who needed to know, and then that information passed on to the customer. The customer in this case is the former president's detail that would have hopefully held him off that stage and not put him out there in that line of fire. The fact that it appears that they did not get that information is one of the key elements here. Thankfully, after one shot and unfortunately after killing a patron and injuring two others, we were able to neutralize the shooter. But we got far too long in this process before that information got to where it needed to get to, and that is a very troubling issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree any more than what he's talking about. It should have been a red light immediately as soon as any officer realized that there was a point of danger, that instead of just one red light, all the lights should have went off. Everybody should have taken notice that there's a gun. But it didn't happen that way. Now, is this something that can be prevented? Maybe they need a special app on their phone to where everybody can be tied into the same line, to where even if it's some of your local police agencies there that can basically hit a button and now everybody's light lights up together. What do they call that? Like a code 11 or code whatever. It's a way for that group to protect themselves and protect those who are supposed to be protected. And obviously that didn't happen. A code red should have been instantly sent to all that was around in that area, that we got trouble. Not we may have trouble, we have trouble. And that in and of itself, in that time delay, could have very well saved that man's life and could have actually prevented the danger to a prior president's life, and could have actually saved the gunner's life by having him obtained before he ever got up on top of the building to begin with. As soon as the gun was seen, there should have been like a lockdown, you know? But it wasn't. There was a time frame there that was delayed. So there is no reasonable explanation for it. You can say gross negligence, you can say this or that, or you can also say, well, maybe it was intended. Maybe that was the way it was planned. Maybe they intended for the security to be lax that day because somebody from within wanted to take out prior president and not allowing for him to ever be president again. You keep in mind, there's been a lot of hair-raising, eyebrow-moving events that's happened just within the past 4 to 5 years, ever since COVID's hit, regarding the election, lies of it being stolen and who's actually in charge, from COVID to trying to get back on our feet, to January the 6th to July the 13th. We're going to have to tighten it up. If we don't, there will be hell to pay. I'm going to end that by saying that because, I can't just get on here and just talk, because if I do, people's going to think that something's wrong with me. But I've been trying to warn people again and again and again of a bloody road ahead, just like I've been warning people about all these other phenomenons happening all over the planet, especially with, like, right now out in California, they got one of the largest fires in American history. And it's just destroying our wood lining forestry, in addition to destroying lives, to destroying communities, to destroying people's lives. If it ain't one thing, it's 1,000 other different things. And it's like all of a sudden we've been bombarded. We've been invaded with all this BS. And I'm telling you right now, the Bible is fulfilling itself regarding that in the last days, Satan will come down in great wrath because it or he knows its time is short. And that's not a national warning that I'm putting out. That is a global warning that I'm putting out. A global warning of a bloody road ahead, of major phenomenon electrical disturbances to come.
Julie, you watched this entire hearing. Talk to us about the tone of it. It also seemed to me there are a lot of marching orders, a lot of questions that both of the men said they would get back to the senators with answers about.
Yeah, exactly, Chris. And I also was able to talk to a lot of senators as they went in and out of this hearing here. Notably, as you heard Gary Peters, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, allude to at the end there, he told me that this is just the beginning. They are going to hold many transcribed interviews, including with Kim Cheadle, the outgoing Secret Service director who is responsible for what happened on that day. They want to talk to her too, even though she's not in this position now anymore. The other thing that was very clear to me is that there is not a lot of daylight. This is rare between Republicans and Democrats when it comes to this issue. That is something that was echoed to me by many Republicans, by many Democrats. They are really on the same page here. In fact, already building out their next steps here in letters that they're going to send, in concrete questions that they have still for Ronald Rowe, who is the acting director here of the Secret Service. And they are going to get to the bottom of this. And then, of course, third here is that you have a couple of senators, some Senate Republicans up for re-election, who of course are not satisfied with Rowe in that room. One of those was Senator Josh Hawley, who had a very testy exchange, frankly, with Rowe. Take a listen to this.
You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge this was a failure of the
Is it
Secret
not
Service.
prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days,
Then
just like you
fire
have.
somebody to
And I will
hold
tell
them
you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people
I can't believe
unfairly
that you
persecuted.
are unfairly.
And I want to say something on the behalf of some of the things that I've been involved in, especially going out west and doing my own private journalist investigate with the Oklahoma ordeal tied in with the Mount Carmel Waco deal. There has been many of nights that I have lost sleep over this, seeing the visions and hearing the testimonies and feeling the hurt of so many people, and it was not taken lightly whatsoever in me going out there doing what I done. It was not taken lightly at all. A matter of fact, I questioned God. God, is this really what you want me to do? Is go out there and do that? You want me to go out there and dig up old skeletons that has already done been buried just to be able to reveal the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help us God. And God said, yeah, that's what I want you to do. It's deserving for closure, for people to know the whole truth and not just bits and pieces of it. I'm still at awe in thinking all these years since the assassination of JFK that the people still have not gotten down to the bottom of it. I'm still at awe in knowing who the perpetrators was that masterminded 9/11, that the people still hadn't gotten down to the bottom of it towards holding people accountable. And it makes me scratch my head towards thinking to myself, all right, they call this country over here a country of justice. But yet no, it wants to attack the prophets and the true Christians, or just leave them hanging and dangling in dereliction of duty. And we talk about justice, but we really don't actually act upon to it. Proof is in the pudding, in the occurrences that has happened now in not just my life, but in the form of things, the scheme of things in the past 40 plus years since 1983. Proof is in the pudding. You can look at it from a economical standpoint, you can look at it from an environmental standpoint, you can look at it from a spiritual standpoint, you can look at it from a philosophy standpoint. Proof is in the pudding. We are going backwards and not forwards. Donald Trump is correct whenever he talks about a country declining. We are declining with our morals. Whenever they took God out of school, whenever they told the parents that they could no longer discipline their children the way that even I was disciplined growing up, in which I realized a lot of that was abusive that I was dealing with at the time, but some of those ass whippings that I got from my daddy, I deserved. Some of them black eyes, I deserved. Some of them scars and them marks that I got, I brought up onto myself. And I'm man enough to tell you that. Now, granted, in defense of the innocent, I feel like the things should have been tightened up a little tighter whenever it comes to parenting discipline actions. But we went too far to the far left. We're extremists. We go to one side or the other. I don't know why we do that, but we do. How come we can't hit a happy medium in the chord of in the center of it being right is beyond me. But we'll go from one extreme to another, from that extreme to another. And I've seen that again and again, from alcoholism to drug addiction to being too strict on your children to not being strict at all. Basically letting the computer and the internet and social media raise your kids. It's a total mess. And until we get our heads wrapped around this stuff and understand who the true enemy is and what the enemy is, we're only going to be like a dog chasing after its tail. We're going to be moving, but we're not going to be going nowhere. We're going to be moving, but we're not going to be going nowhere.
Fairly persecuted.
Unfairly,
people
sir.
who are
We
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
What we heard from...
And I'm like that guy. He's wanting to be cautious about not passing judgment on the fault. And I didn't want to pass judgment on the people out there in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, pertaining to the ATF and then the FBI. I didn't want to pass judgment on the original investigators that investigated the Oklahoma bombing. I didn't want to do that. And I told God, are you sure that you really want me to go out there and do this? And God verified it. He said, yes, this is what I want you to do. So out of labor of love, that's what I've done. Now, have I been rewarded for it? Not even. Still being persecuted and criticized and humiliated and demonized for trying to do the proper thing. Just like Al Gore. I've used him for an example many different times on some of my other material. Al Gore tried to do the proper thing by telling the world that the world was changing and that get ready for major shifts pertaining to environmental changes And instead of Al Gore being rewarded for it, he got punished for it. Instead of Al Gore, that was running for Tennessee president, of him being rewarded, he got punished for trying to do the proper and right thing. Well, now we can see, 20 plus years later, of what Al Gore was talking about, that he was hitting it on the money. But yet, no, we still got people out there that wants to spew out crazy stuff like drill, 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 baby, drill, drill, drill. Wow. You're really not going to be satisfied until you actually not just get close to the edge, but actually fall off of it. And I don't know how you feel whenever it comes to following after people that wants to lead you down this path of destruction or walk you off into the mouth of the volcano. But I've got enough sense to think for myself and to do for myself. And at this point in time, the only thing that I know to do, because of this criticizing spotlight that's been put on me, is basically just to hunker down, stay calm, cool, and collected, put out your videos, tell people about your messages, and hopefully one day, even if I'm dead and gone, somebody will find the material and say, oh, wait a minute, look here. This guy knew what was happening. He was trying to tell us ahead of time. But we didn't listen. The British are coming! The British are coming! Some people took it serious, and others did not. Please, for not just the American sakes, but for humanity's sakes, you better awaken and tighten up. Because if you don't, coming near a neighborhood near you, Christ said to pray for one or two things. To pray that you was worthy to escape these things that was going to be befallen up here up onto the planet, or to pray that you could endure them, indicating that they would be falling up onto the planet. No ifs, no ands, no buts, no mythologies, no theories. Those are facts. Now, whether or not you want to accept the facts towards them being facts, that's another issue. But people like me, people like Al Gore, other people that try to put out strong messages of concern for the benefit and the well-being of humanity, we're doing our jobs. We're doing what we're called to do. Now, whether or not there's a follow-up pertaining to the people that support those people that are trying to help those people, that's another issue. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on, because it's very obvious the planet Earth, the Earthlings, are in trouble. And of course, if they're not going to listen, then that's going to make them that much more even being susceptible in more trouble.
From Holly there, it seemed to me like an outlier from even the other Republicans on the committee. A lot of them have said that at this point, Roe has taken over. They want him to continue and finish the job. He did come into this hearing with many more details, with many more answers. Of course, more time has passed as well, with pictures, with photo evidence, really trying to show the senators and lawmakers on this panel that they are taking this seriously. He even said in his opening statements, Chris, that he will do a full accounting. He takes full accountability. He is embarrassed for what happened on that day. But when it comes to a rush to judgment here, it is clear, even as Senator Blumenthal had told me, a Democrat, that there needs to be a systematic reform of this agency, top to bottom. He told me that this isn't just a one and done situation, and you see that not only in this situation, but also with the task force that has been formed in the House by partisan members on both sides of the aisle, trying to get to the bottom of this, trying to also see whether the Secret Service needs more resources. There was one instance where they talked about the agency having double the number of resources that they had in recent years, and yet a lapse in Secret Service agents, especially when it comes to that day.
Julie Sirkin, Robert McDonald, Tom Winter, thank you. We would love to talk more about this, but we have breaking news from overseas. The IDF has carried out a strike targeting a Hezbollah commander in Beirut. It follows that rocket attack from Lebanon that killed at least 12 people, mostly children. NBC's Matt Bradley is on the ground for us in Beirut. What more do we know?
Yeah, we don't know a whole lot, Chris, but news is coming in pretty fast. You're seeing, I think, some of these images that we're seeing from that neighborhood in southern Beirut called Dahia. Now, this has long been a stronghold for Hezbollah, and now, if you recall, this was the reprisal attack by the Israelis to an attack that happened 3 days ago on Saturday that the Israelis say was launched by Hezbollah, which is based here in Lebanon, mostly in southern Lebanon, and in that neighborhood, Dahia, right off my right shoulder there in the southern part of Beirut. Now, according to some reports, this was an Israeli strike that targeted a senior sort of gathering place, a Shura Council, kind of a governing body for Hezbollah. We haven't got that confirmed, but what we do know from the Israelis that they did have a specific target in mind. They said that they were targeting the head of the operations for the Sheba area, which is another part of essentially Syria or Lebanon or Israel, depending on who you believe, that is now occupied by the Israelis. They say that this man, whose name is Ali Mohammed Yahya, that he was in charge of targeting from this area, and that he was therefore the target of this Israeli reprisal attack. So this Ali Mohammed Yahya we don't know if he was killed. We don't know how many casualties there were. This happened really in just the past hour. And there are really a lot of other questions here, too. Whether or not this is going to satisfy the Israelis that they have exacted retribution against Hezbollah. And this has been a question that's been bouncing around here in Lebanon for the past several days, ever since that deadly attack on the soccer pitch that killed 12 people, or now 13, all of them children and teenagers. Whether or not Israel is going to be satisfied, or whether this is the beginning of a barrage of counterattacks against Hezbollah, that's a question that only the Israelis are going to be able to answer in the coming days. Chris?
Given all the conversations about the threat of a wider war, what has been the mood on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, well, what we're hearing here, I mean, among the Lebanese, the mood is normal. Everybody here is quite, unworried that anything is going to really happen very seriously. We haven't been down south yet. That's the Hezbollah stronghold, and those are the places in the south of this country that tend to be more badly damaged, really devastated by the conflicts between Hezbollah and the Israelis. Already there's been hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced from their homes in southern Lebanon. For them, this risk is very, very real and very pressing. But here on the streets of central Beirut, you wouldn't know that there was anything going on, that there was a threat on people's lives. But this really is really a risk for the wider Middle East as well. Because if there is a wider war here that involves Hezbollah and involves the Israelis, that could drag in Iran. It could also drag in the United States, which has already for several months been parking naval assets off the coast of Israel and Lebanon in preparation for just such an event as this. So that is why this is so threatening. If there were to be such a war, it would be like the war between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It would be one that the burden would be carried mostly by civilians in the region. Chris?
As it often is. I also want to bring in General Barry McCaffrey. General, look, I suppose
We're going to stop right here. Good luck to all of us. The events that took place whenever Reagan was president, that was a turning point. That was one of the biggest mistakes that our American politicians could have ever, and preachers could have ever taken a part of. Good luck to all of us. And shalom.